everyone, it's Mary. Today I will be filming my April wrap-up, and of course the weather has decided to be just awful because we've had some beautiful days of sun, and just today that I started to film, it's about to rain and it's so dark. We are now slowly getting out of this COVID situation. I feel like we were one of the earlier countries to get into the mess. So naturally we're also one of the first to get out of the mess, hopefully. I don't want to be too positive about it. First 2 weeks of March, those were pretty tough for us because we were very anxious and I couldn't really read anything that was not the news. And after that, I started to get used to the situation and actually make the most of it, and also find the positives of this whole thing. And now and after that I started to get back to reading, and I read a lot. So let's start with the book that I probably enjoyed the least, which is technically it's not true because I gave it 3 stars, although it would be more of a 2.5. But let's not focus too much on star ratings. Let's focus on feelings about books. And this is written in my own heart's blood by Gabaldon. Obviously, I'm not gonna talk at all about the plot of this one because this is the 8th book in the Outlander series. For the longest time, I thought this was gonna be the last, but it's not the last book. She's gonna write at least other 2 books, so it's gonna be a 10 books sort of series. She's been writing this series since the 80s, so it has its flaws, it has its problems. They're all very, very visible. But aside from that, I'm so done with everybody, with the story, with things that are repeating themselves. This is a very long series. Each book is more than 1,000 pages long, and yeah, I don't know why I'm still reading this series. I just feel weirdly attached to the characters and to their doings, but other than that, there are a lot of things that piss me off, and it's just, I don't know. The first 4 books were good. Aside from the problems that could have to a modern reader, they were interesting. They were, I wanted, to know what was gonna happen. I cared about the characters. And then it all started to go downhill from there. And I don't know why I'm still reading this series. But yeah, I finished this one. Then I want to talk about a book that I gave 2 stars to, which is a translated book from the Korean, and it's my 2nd Korean book. And it is 100 Shadows by Wang Yewon, translated by Yewon. And I'm very sorry about, this is something I wanted to mention for a long time on my channel, that I barely remember to tell you guys who translated a novel, just because it's something very new to me, to having to seek for the translator, because as an Italian reader, most of the books that I read growing up, or just most of the books that are out, are translated. So it's not the norm is not to have books in Italian and then you have translated books as it is sort of different section. And so when I remember when I was very young, I didn't even know, it was just normal that people had different names I never heard of. They were living in different sort of cities and places that I didn't know of. And it's just weird for me now to acknowledge that actually, of course they're translated, because 90% of the books that I read growing up were translated from the English. So now that I'm reading in English, it feels weird to actually, again, acknowledge that there are books that are translated from other, languages. So yeah, this is a little novella set in a slum electronics market in Seoul, and it follows these 2 main characters, a man and a woman, and as they build this sort of relationship between them. They live in this sort of depressing and eerie sort of atmosphere in which people's shadows are starting to rise, which is something that apparently is very alarming. Their instinct when their shadows rise is to follow them, and apparently that's a bad thing. This is sort of a magical realism element to it that I don't particularly enjoy. That's because I don't particularly like magical realism, especially when I'm not familiar with the setting and the circumstances, even, you know, cultural wise. And when you have such a short space to develop this sort of story, being, you know, this novel so short. The writing style is engaging enough to keep the reader going, but ultimately I think that too many threads were left dangling, and it just rings as a missed opportunity, I think, to tell something more, something else. Or maybe I just didn't get it. That's, you know, entirely possible. I did not dislike this book. It had some good segments in it, but I don't think I would ever, you know, reread this one, so this is going. Then I reread a book that was a teenage favorite, which is How I Live Now by Meg Rosoff. And I was pleasantly surprised because I think it aged pretty well. All considered, it was a very quick read, but I do think it has like some merit to it. This is sort of an alternative reality novel in which the American protagonist is sent off to the UK at her cousin's house in the countryside to spend the summer. She's not really in good terms with her family back in the US. Her father remarried, and they have like the new couple have a new child. But as soon as she settles in, a war breaks out and things get really intense. Although I read an Italian translation because that's what I owned as I was a teenager, I do think the writing style is pretty good. It was witty and funny even when dealing with like serious topics such as violence and self-harm. I also could detect a lot of like knowledge and expertise on the matter, which gave the book a sense of reality. So yeah, I really enjoyed my experience rereading this one, and I saw there's a movie out with Saoirse Ronan in it, and I really now want to check out the movie as well. Then I read Blindness by José Saramago, and I read an Italian translation of this one. I owned this book for a pretty long time, and I was just waiting for the opportunity to actually read it. This was actually our Voxer book club pick for March, but I ended up reading this one in April because, as I said, in March the situation was not the best, especially to be reading a book as bleak and dark as this one that is about an epidemic that makes people go blind. And while it's probably not the best book to be reading during a real pandemic, I found it sort of cathartic and reassuring because things in the book get much worse than they are right now. So probably you could, you know, read it and say, well, at least we didn't do that. It mainly follows a group of assorted people that are associated by the fact that we're the first bunch to get infected, and they are quarantined in this former asylum with no help, little food, and they're basically left to their own devices. What's interesting is the writing style is very impersonal and detached. Like, for example, you don't, like, people have no names, they only have like a characteristic, so such as like the main character of the novel is the doctor's wife, for example. Despite that, I think the narration flowed pretty smoothly. I think it's a harsh and brutal study of humanity and how the, you know, savage and instinctive nature of human beings overcomes empathy and selflessness, and how easily structures like religion and society again crumble in this sort of scenario. But despite the sort of depressing feeling to it, I think it leaves room for also hope, especially in the interactions between the people in this main group. I think this one is an important read, and it's actually, yeah, it's really worth checking out. And I'm told there is also a sequel out, which I didn't know of, and now I want to check that out as well and see what I think of it. Then I finished How Children Learn by Holt. I think I talked about this one a couple of times on my channel because I've been reading this book for a while. This actually was my pick for Curious Adventure, the Curious Adventure challenge that I'm gonna link down below. This was a very cheat pick for, again, March, because actually I started this book I think in February, but this would fulfill the prompt of reading about something that I enjoy, reading more about something that I enjoy, and obviously how children learn is a topic that's very close to my heart. And John Holt is a private teacher, an advocate for homeschooling. Of course, my camera died on me and I couldn't, I don't know why it doesn't make any sound, so I kept talking for like 20 minutes, but I'm fine now. I'll repeat myself. He questions the scholastic system and shows his research on how children actually learn and how wrong it is to force them to do something that they have not like immediate interest in, and how children are born with this innate want to learn everything that's around them, and how we kill this instinct by, again, teaching them stuff, not only in schools but also in our home, just trying to make them perform things for our pleasure more than theirs. And it's just, I thought it was, I agree with him, and he also sources like Montessori, and she is someone that I very much love and respect. I read a lot on and also by her, and she basically says the same thing. It's not that children shouldn't, learn things that are important for like our culture, but they should, care about what they're learning. Otherwise, you're not learning anything. And I know that for personal experience, because I don't remember anything that I learned in like high school and middle school. I just hated school, and I think most children hate school. Some of them don't, but things for them are not even easy because they maybe are bullied, or they feel pressured by the fact that they have to know things and they have to prove themselves to be better than other people, than the other children. And I know something because my sister was actually someone who really enjoyed school but really had a hard time going to school. She was just always feeling anxiety towards it. So yeah, I just agree with what he says, and I loved how he actually says, and I think I already said this in a previous video, but how children would not even learn how to talk if we taught them, and they do that by themselves and very effectively. And if you notice that they actually do that in their own way, like each child is different. Maybe they start learning some things first, or they start talking when they're 18 months, or they start talking when they're 3 years old. So everybody is different, and the school should be more focused on encouraging these differences instead of trying to level everybody and just give marks. And I love this book. I loved what he was saying, and I also feel a little bit depressed because I would love to homeschool my child, but it's just something that I cannot afford, or I cannot do it. So I'm very sad about that. But I think this book is very interesting and useful for any parent or for anybody that's concerned with children's education, with teaching to them, or just if you're interested. I think this was very valid. And then on to the books that I really struggle to articulate, but I'll try. I read the first 2 books in the Neapolitan novels. So I read My Brilliant Friend and The Story of the New Name by Elena Ferrante. I obviously own both in Italian because they are originally in Italian, and I'm gonna hold this one because I'm pretty sure that the cover looks familiar to all of you, since the English cover is the same. I was very hesitant to get to this series, although I really wanted to try it out just because it's been so popular even outside of Italy. Obviously it's popular in Italy as well, but it's the first time that a contemporary author, a contemporary Italian author, is so well loved outside of Italy. So I was very curious, and my expectations were over the moon, you know, they were very high, and I'm very glad that I actually ended up really enjoying them. I gave this first one 4 stars just because it really sets the grounding for the entire series. There are 4 books in this series, but that's not really the reason why. I feel like it feels like a complete novel. I just feel like it lacked, I lacked to acknowledge that it was actually, you know, a book that was slowly getting more and more invested in, like the story and the characters. I read it so quickly, and it, you know, it's something that never happens to me, not anymore at least, and I couldn't just, you know, read it in 2 days and then give it 5 stars. It was something was keeping me from giving this book 5 stars. Although going back, I would probably, like on a reread, I would probably give this one 5 stars. I did give 5 stars to the second one. It was just amazing. I was so immersed in it and so invested in the characters and in the story. I couldn't stop reading, and actually these books were supposed to be a buddy read with Natalie over at A Curious Reader. She's very sweet, and she's actually, you know, I am a lousy buddy reader, as I said multiple times on this channel, because usually I'm the one dragging behind because I don't have a lot of time, and my pace is not as fast as it was back in the days when I didn't have a toddler. But with this one, I was actually very quick, and I couldn't, you know, wait for her, and I just read the first 2 books. And I'm trying to wait for the 3rd and the 4th. I'm waiting for her to finish the 2nd one. I don't want to put pressure on her. It's just something that I'm trying for myself, even to slow down and, you know, get more out of the story. Because I feel like, you know, I stopped reading quickly, not only because I didn't have time to read, but also because I felt like slow reading really helps you get more into the story, and it just leaves a deeper mark. So that's just what I'm trying to do with these ones, because they're so addictive. I just cannot put them down. But yeah, this is the story is set in Naples, in Italy, mainly in the 60s, but it's actually a story that spans from childhood of the main protagonist, who's called Elena, or Lenou, as she's called by everybody else, and her relationship with, her friendship with Lila. So it follows these 2 girls, first as they are, you know, children, and then through their teenage years and then adulthood, and you know that they're gonna go, you know, on and on until they are over 60, I think, because that's just the beginning of the book. So I'm not spoiling anything to you. It's just, you know, from the beginning, Lenou is writing and telling the story from, you know, from a distance, and it's just a brilliant study on human relationships in general. It's just, their relationship is very conflicted, is very troublesome, is also toxic in a way, but it's more than that. It's very complex and layered, as you know, most relationships really are. There is love and hate, there's jealousy, there's a lot packed into in this book, and it's just, that's the addictive quality to it. You are deeply invested in the characters, and you want to know what happens. Not, you know, it's not so dense plot wise, although of course things happen, but it's not that you want to, you know, keep on reading. It's just because you get so invested again in the characters that you don't want to leave them to their own devices. You want to be present every step they take. In this story, there is a lot of violence and abuse, and, you know, even sexual violence. It's not a pretty story, and the writing style, I think, really helps in this sense. It's very clean and very, you know, without frills. It's not lyrical, which is not something that would have worked that well, I think, in this sort of scenario, which is unfortunately very realistic considering the time and place of the novel. it's not exaggerated, I can tell you that. It's just as it is. It feels very real. And even if it's not like this poetic writing style, it is very hypnotizing, and it just feels sort of naked. It soaks you in, and it just doesn't leave you. It's just something that I really loved about you know, her as a writer. And actually, now that I say that, I'm really even interested in her as a writer, and she's a very sort of mysterious person because she's very private and doesn't share basically anything about her. We don't know her face. We don't even know if it's a woman or a man, although I'm pretty sure she's a woman. We only know, I think, when she's born and where, in Naples, so where the story is set, but we don't know, maybe, we don't know anything else. She actually wrote a nonfiction book about her experience as a writer, which I ordered. I'm gonna read that one because I'm just very interested in her. And a part of me really likes the mystery of this because I don't actually want to know how much she drew from personal experience. But another part of me that's very curious just wants to know everything about her, or yeah, more about her at least. So that's why I ordered the nonfiction book. So I'm gonna wait for now, but I'm sure that I'm gonna get to the other two books pretty quickly. I know there's also a TV show out that covers only the first two books, but I want to wait until I finished the whole thing before getting to the TV show. I'm so glad that I picked this book, that I picked these books up. So that was it for my April wrap-up. I hope you enjoyed, and I hope we can talk about the books in the comment, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye!